All right, you are ready for some advanced square root work. So we're going to do a video called Square Roots Extension. One thing that is important to know about square roots that we didn't cover in the regular classroom is that sometimes you are going to have to deal with some negative numbers. So the square root of 9, this expression here, means what number times itself equals 9? What can I multiply by itself to get 9? And of course we know that 3 times 3 equals 9, but also negative 3 times negative 3 equals 9. So sometimes in like real life situations, we only concern ourselves with the positive answer because if we're measuring distance or building something, we have to measure, area in our yard or, I don't know, wood to build a tree house or something. We have only positive numbers that we're dealing with, but really mathematically, negative 3 times negative 3 equals 9 as well, so that could be an answer to this problem if you weren't given a real world context. So you would write that, there's two answers to the square root of 9. And you would write that with this symbol, this plus or minus symbol. It's like a plus sign right on top of a minus sign. You can read that as plus or minus, or you can read that as positive or negative. And so you would write the answer to that previous problem we were talking about as the square root of 9 equals plus or minus 3, or the square root of 9 equals positive or negative 3. Another thing to know about square roots that we haven't covered in class is that sometimes you might see a negative before the square root symbol, and that just means the opposite of the answer to what's under the square root symbol. So for example, if you had negative square root of 9, you could think of that as 49, sorry. You could think of that as the opposite of the square root of 49, which would be 7. The square root of 49 is 7. The opposite of 7 is negative 7. Another thing to think about is what happens if there's a fraction under the square root sign. When that happens, both the numerator and the denominator have the square root applied to them, or they get square rooted. I'm not sure if that's really a math term, but it kind of describes accurately what's happening, I guess. So for example, if you had the square root of 49/100ths, that would equal 7/10, because the square root of 49 is 7, the square root of 100 is 10, so you could think of that as like the square root of 49 divided by the square root of 100, and that would equal 7/10. Or, going back to here, you could just think of like the square root of 49 is 7, the square root of 100 is 10, and you don't have to write this in-between step here, but that's really what's happening.